Andrei, you've spent many years advising Vladimir Putin. Can you give us an insight on his actions here?
I'm really apologize that I cannot explain a lot of right now, but what happened just 30 minutes ago completely changes what I have prepared to tell you as well as to anyone else, because about 30 minutes ago, Putin has ordered to put all nuclear arsenal of Russia on the highest alert. And he used this particular decision as answer and response not to the situation in Ukraine, not even what is going on in Ukraine right now, but as a response to American readiness to apply sanctions. So the situation now is unbelievably grave, is incomparable to what we had just 1 hour ago, not even yesterday. So now, if the United States will not respond with adequate reaction to this decision, it means not only Ukraine, but whole Europe. And at some point, United States will be under nuclear threat, direct nuclear threat. So that is why United States and NATO countries need to respond immediately right now to this nuclear blackmail of Putin.
Andrei, what kind of response is Putin expecting after making this nuclear threat?
That should be exactly the same. It should be putting all nuclear arsenal of United States and NATO on the highest alert. At least equal response to what Putin has did just 30 minutes or 40 minutes ago. Is the only way to just not only to stop, we cannot even to say about stop, but at least that he would think a little bit about possible consequences. This absolutely changes whole game. It's not about Ukraine. It's not even about Europe. And Putin has said very clearly for last few weeks and especially yesterday that his goal is not Ukraine. His goal is 1997 line in Europe, which means half of Europe will be under his sphere of influence. But to get this, he needs to humiliate the United States and NATO. And he is doing exactly that right now. So if there will be no response from the United States and not NATO right now, so Putin will proceed with his plan.
And I mean, we know we're getting breaking news now that Ukraine and Russia will meet for talks on the border of Ukraine and Belarus. Have you heard of this? Do you know any more information beyond that?
No, once again, I was going to talk about this huge tank column that is moving towards Kiev. I was going to talk about the Belarusian paratroopers that going to just going right to the government quarter into Kiev. It might happen just within minutes. But once again, now it's not about Kiev. It's not about Ukraine. It's not even about Europe. It's about the United States and the whole world. Because nuclear arsenal is a nuclear arsenal. Nuclear weapons is nuclear weapons. That's an absolutely different game. And that is why if there is no response from the United States government and NATO administrations right now, we cannot predict what kind of development we'll see just within very short period of time.
The thought of nuclear war, I think, terrifies us all. And you're right, that completely does change the game, puts a lot more stake into it. What do you think that is what needs to happen for the United States to finally get involved, that threat? I mean, I'm surprised that we haven't done more now. What is
sanctions enough? Is closing down airspace enough? Or what do we do to stop this nuclear threat?
I'm really sorry, but all these sanctions, even closing airspace, it's already too late. Once again, Putin launched absolutely new level of the so-called geopolitical game. It is absolutely different quality. So if there is no adequate response from the United States and NATO right now, so United States and NATO will be losing. It is by definition. You can talk to generals, you can talk to military experts. It is absolutely clear. It's not your choice to wage nuclear war. No, it's a nuclear deterrence. If you don't do nuclear deterrence, Putin will be using nuclear threat and nuclear blackmail against anyone, including the United States. He's already using against the United States this nuclear threat right now. Just listen to what he said just 30 or 40 minutes ago. Just listen carefully what he said. It is response not to Ukraine. It's not to Europe. it is response to the United States.